Welcome to the National Center for Writing's Meet the World event. My name is Nuraliah Norasid, and I am a writer and educator from Singapore. I have the immense privilege of chairing today's event. Okay, we have with us three extremely talented writers with tremendously powerful and authentic voices. Every one of their writing is remarkable in the way that they show experiences, complexities, and the humanness of being in and seeing the world from the margins of a larger, often more privileged society. At the same time, their writing and voices challenge existing structures and attitudes while also highlighting various instances of discrimination, abuse, and racism that they and many others like them have faced. To start off today's event, I will introduce each of them and we will get to hear readings from each of them as well before going into a conversation with all of them on the topic of of writing from spaces within the margins. Yeah. So first we have Ava Verde. So Ava Verde is a writer from Forest Gate, East London. She is of dual heritage, and this is something that we see explored with razor-sharp veracity and nuance in her debut novel, Lives Like Mine, published by Simon and Schuster just this year. Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So yes, let me just plug all the books. No, because I have a yes, so there you go. So I have started reading the book, and it's a difficult book to put down because there are just so many things that are familiar and also very relatable in the novel. So I would highly recommend it. So identity and class are recurring themes throughout her work as she studies towards an MA in prose fiction. Her love song to libraries, I Am Not Your Tituber, forms part of Kit DeWall's Common People, an anthology of working class writers with Unbound. So Eva's work has been featured in Marie Claire, Grazia, and Elle. So Eva lives in Essex with a husband, children, and dog. And now let us hear a reading from Ava Verde.
Oh, thank you. I'm going to read my piece, I'm Not Your Tituber. I've taken a section which sort of highlights the otherness and the themes that we plan to discuss today. So, all right. I was 10 when my mum married a lovely man who became my dad and gave me sisters. We grew to a family of 6 and with the lure of green spaces and cheaper housing left London for Essex. In November 1990, I enrolled in my new school and was shocked, then rather alarmed, to find myself the sole brown face there. Chelmsford was alien territory, learning a new world all over again. Regular words and phrases took on new meanings. Both uptown and down the town referred to the modest shopping centre, where the buildings sat flat and unremarkable, with not even a double-decker bus passing by for a fleeting hot splash of colour. My uptown had been impromptu visits to Parliament Square with my nan and uncle, plum skies hugging an illuminated Big Ben as I dragged my fingers along the black iron fencing, admiring it. I clung to these memories, the old life's events, as my new life felt ever more a wilderness, and the shame started. In my page-a-day diary, because the 10-year-old me had so much to say, I wrote, I'm hung like a picture. It's like I got off a spaceship. You move for the better, but nothing's better, and I don't count. I'd been in Chelmsford for 3 weeks. A month later, and the shame grew spores. I feel stupid. Asked my mum if I was adopted. She said, why would she adopt a kid, being only a kid herself? But I don't feel belonging inside me, not even to my family. I don't remember feeling it before, but I don't. And everywhere I go, there's nasty eyes like question marks upon us. Being the only brown face in my family, in my white family, meant outside of the home I was set apart too. Moments like this became routine. I began to dread the family outings, wishing I didn't stand out so we wouldn't get the nasty question marks. Paranoia held me close, dominating every decision. Where am I from? What am I? The passive-aggressive diatribe of how I came to be was asked almost daily, but to explain was impossible without articulating the truth. Illegitimate, disconnected from any cultural bond to my ethnicity. I was ashamed by how these people viewed me, believing their way to be the right way. Being brown and different was my fault.
Yeah, thank you so much for
Oh,
that
you're
beautiful reading, Ava. Yeah, I think
welcome.
from your reading, I remembered reading the piece, and it was that moment stood out particularly. Yeah, thank you so much.
Oh, you're
So
very welcome. Thank you.
now moving on, we shall hear from Lyanna Damira. So Lyanna Damira is from my hometown of Singapore. She is an author, entrepreneur, and a political candidate in Singapore's 2020 general elections. In her memoir, okay, that we have here, okay, Homeless, the Untold Story of a Mother's Struggle in Crazy Rich Singapore, Lyanna writes about the experience of homelessness, both of her own and of others in the same situation as she was. And also in the book, she covers the gap in social welfare and care in Singapore. She is also a contributing writer for the anthology Singapore Birthday Book 2020, Seeing Clearly, and White, Behind Mental Health Stigma. Lyanna's life experiences also inspired her to start Virtual Assistant Singapore, a company that provides various other companies around the globe with their virtual assistant needs. Lyanna was recently recognized as a part of 100 women honored for outstanding achievements in tech in Singapore, and was the recipient of the Woman of Resilience Award from AWARE in 2019. She has also been invited to be a speaker on TEDx Singapore. Work and life as a mother of four keeps her busy, but in between it all, Lyanna actively advocates for lower income and underprivileged families. So now let's hear it from Lyanna. Lyanna, please.
Thank you so much, Nuraliah, for that very kind introduction. Okay, so I'm gonna do the reading from my book, and this is a chapter where I try to find help for myself and the others in the community. About 24 hours prior to this journey, in the middle of our miserable tent, I broke down and wept uncontrollably. I could no longer stand the cold and damp climate in our new surroundings. West Coast Park's environment was markedly different and was a challenge for our little group. We had trouble keeping warm and finding food. We were not even able to cook on our own charcoal stove because the continuous downpour made it difficult to keep the stove burning. The nearest food establishment was McDonald's, and just the thought of eating McDonald's every day made everyone sick. My tolerance had reached its peak, so I took it upon myself to visit social services. As Susie, Agile, and I alighted at the bus stop of the Singapore Labour Foundation building, I prayed hard. I felt like screaming to release the tension and anxiety building up in me. I was desperate for the Almighty to hear my prayers, desperate for a solution, desperate for a way out, desperate for the instability to end. As I walked from the bus stop and reached the foot of the hill, I froze. Looming before us was a long, winding road which we had to climb by foot. And I was 6 months pregnant. Susie held my hand and suggested that we return on Monday. Without a word, I started making my way up the hill. It was a breathtaking hike, and not the scenic kind. Aside from the birds chirping, all I could hear was Suji and Angel panting behind me. I was gasping for air, too, until we finally reached the entrance of MCYS. That it is.
Thank you so much, Lyanna. Yes, that particular moment, I think when you're climbing that hill, 6 months pregnant, trying to seek aid was also another image that just stayed with me. Yeah, thank you so much for that reading. Yeah, thank you so much for that reading.
My pleasure, Nuraliah.
Yeah. And now we shall hear from Rolinda Onates Española. Rolinda is a poet, a mother, a helper, sister, fighter and a winner from Bacolod City in the Philippines. She worked in Singapore as a foreign domestic worker, working for the same employer from 2012 to 2019. Life as a domestic worker is never easy. And in that time, she enjoyed only 2 Sundays off per month, and even then with very strict curfews. Even with those limitations, Rolinda makes time to help and serve her community. She was among those who founded Migrant Writers of Singapore, a group and community that provides a platform for migrant artists to come together and develop through their love of literature and writing. She also facilitated a carnival of poetry and became one of the books, okay, in the Human Library Singapore. She does all this and so much more. So there's just so much that she has done. It's absolutely fantastic. So in her literary life, Rolinda has plenty of accolades as well. Just to name a few, she was the winner of the 2018 poetry competition organized by Home, an organization in Singapore dedicated to supporting and empowering migrant workers, and the National Museum of Singapore. She co-edited Call and Response 1 and is the author of the poetry collection, No Cinderella, Poems of a Filipina Domestic Worker in Singapore, 2016 to 2018. Her works were also featured in the eco-journal Tiger Moth Review, and Beneath Them Was Forever at Westworth Gallery in New York. Rolinda currently enjoys life with her family and working as a survey specialist representative in a prestigious call center in Bacolod City. So let's hear it from Rolinda.
Thank you so much. And I'm so grateful to be a part of this event. I'm reading a 2 poem on my book. This title is She May Be, and it's on page 7. She may be. She may be the maid you don't respect. Treat her fairly, you neglect. To scold her daily is your habit. See all the wrongs that she commits. She may be the maid with broken English. Cook so nasty, can't perfect a dish. Clean so lousy, can't pass your standard. Cry like a baby, irritates you real hard. She may be the maid with a face you hate. Don't use common sense and can't relate. Can't understand your simple instructions. Cry desperate is her only solution. She may be the maid, you pay her less. She don't complain, you give her less. She don't fight back, you treat her less. She may be the maid. She may be the maid, but full of respect. Obeys you surely without neglect. Do her duty honestly, trying to please you patiently. She may be the maid that give her best. Learn to cook a perfect dish. Try to follow your standard of cleaning. Love your children most without pretending. She may be the maid, but you still hate. Show you affection you don't reciprocate. Crushed her ego, yet she's still at peace. Smile is always painted on her face. She is the maid who understands you best. She is the maid who has become patient of you best. She is the maid who respects you best. She did her best, yet to you, it's less. Thank you. And I have the other one. It's Life Faces. It's a twin cinema that so popular in Singapore. A lot had come. Each had evolved. Each had tried. Each had competed. Each had hope. Each had aspired. But only one stand alone. Only one who has willingness to embrace everything, to go beyond borders, aim beyond expectation, try beyond the limits, because life is a learning. Life is a process that doesn't end. Even if you know everything, It doesn't even stop, even if you win. Let your existence leave a trace, be different among your human race. Let love be love. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for those wonderful readings. And I hope through those readings, all of you watching at home will get a taste of the different stories that can come from various spaces and backgrounds. Yeah. So it is always great to hear authors read their works and to see where it comes from. So all of you have come through very beautifully and triumphantly from such amazing personal backgrounds. Backgrounds that can be described as working class, not exactly what we would appreciate, we would associate with spaces of privilege. So now, literature and the literary arts and writing has so often come from and is so often related to university educations and intellectual academic spaces, to the extent that writers such as yourselves can be seen as by some as anomalies, and can be considered by some as outsider writers as well. So the first question that I would ask all of you is, what does being an outsider writer mean to you? Maybe let's start with Ava.
Okay, yeah, sure. I think that being an outsider writer means not being part of the mainstream. You exist on the peripheries, and my story and my background isn't often represented in books, or, you know, I'm not the natural assumption in fiction. I think that's probably the best way. I'm sort of on the outside looking in, as opposed to being part of it.
Yeah, and we do get a sense of that in the piece that you read as well.
Yeah.
And in the where your experiences, through your experiences, you're also able to see experiences of people in maybe other working class spaces and yeah, experience and existences. Yeah. So, and how about you, Liyana? So what does being an outsider writer mean to you?
To be honest, I just come across this term of outsider writer when we're doing this panel, and it's not only that I've not heard of it before, I've not thought of to be as an outsider writer before, as I find that writing is an expression that anyone can do, regardless of their background, regardless of where they come from, regardless of how privileged they are. So for me, just on the term alone, hearing it for this first time, I would say that outsider writer to me is someone that goes beyond and outside what an ordinary traditional writer would do, and that is to be brave in their forms of writing and in their expression.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that does make sense. And then that will lead us to another part of the discussion later. And how about you, Rolinda? So what does being an outsider writer mean to you?
I think being an outsider is really, I am really an outsider writer because I'm not a schooled writer. I didn't go to universities to have all this literary education, and being a migrant writer in Singapore, and being a migrant writer in Singapore and literary scene is really, and as a part of gender exclusion, especially that I am a domestic worker, it's very hard for me, and also for us migrants, and for my writing to really be heard and be noticed. I think that's what I think I consider outsider.
Yeah, and I think in your context, Rolinda, we are hearing more and more, migrant voices, right? The stories of migrant voices through your efforts to to bring all of these literary voices from the migrant
Yeah,
community,
now.
in
Yeah.
Singapore. Yeah.
There were
And-
there were few migrant brothers that made already in an unpack in the Singapore, but there were still few female who dare to take the challenge. So I think that's the greatest challenge, that to step up. And I think I did great when I was in Singapore. I stepped up as a domestic worker. So I think all now that we started, and I started, me as soccer started, I think it's going through. I see all the results. It's a lot more now. A lot of domestic workers taking up this and embracing all this kind of talent. Although that, yeah, we are considered as an outsider writer, but I think now there are a lot of migrants, especially women, domestic workers, that are stepping out. They can, and they can write as well.
Yes,
That's
yeah, they definitely can. And just to kind of like go off on a tangent from there, do you for Ava and Liyana, do you see more more and more voices from your communities, from both your communities? Do you see more and more of their voices in the literary space? That you see more and more of these stories being told? Yeah,
Yes,
Ava.
yes,
Yeah.
yes, definitely, yes. In fact, the Common People book placed people just like me, underrepresented writers from marginalized backgrounds, published alongside people from working class backgrounds that had made it, were published and doing well in the literary sphere. Sorry, I'm all tangled. The voices from here, yeah, underrepresented, unpublished, and it seems to be, I did actually write in my notes about how I fear that it's not just a sort of a trend that it's publishing to hear these marginalized voices. I hope that it's something here to stay permanently, because everybody deserves their voice and their story to be told. No matter how niche your perspective in life, it's crucial that we all have a platform to share our words and our experiences. So yes.
Yeah. Okay. And I definitely have a question to go off on a tangent for Ava, but maybe we can hear from Liyana.
Oh yes, back on that, on hearing more voices coming up, definitely Nuraliah. Ever since I think I put in the courage to publish my own memoir, and that is a nonfiction, right? And I'm putting myself out there. Um, it seems to inspire others to write their own memoir and to get it published as well. It's lovely when I get to contribute to this book, which is White Behind the Mental Health Stigma, because mental health is such a taboo issue that we didn't get to discuss here in our country, in Singapore, and there's so much conversation that has yet to be held with it. Also, I am ecstatic, and I've already pre-ordered a memoir that just got released by another publisher, and it surrounds the topic of sexual violence and coming from a first encounter. So that is such a win for me, that from our work, it kind of like inspire others to step out of their own comfort zone, to be brave in putting themselves out there as well. So back to your question, definitely, and I'm so happy to see that.
Yeah. And do you have the same fears that as Ava as well, that this is a trend, that this might be a trend, and we don't want that, you see, because then that gives in to things like poverty porn, where people are just like, oh, we're gonna look at all these sad stories and feel better about ourselves. That, do you fear that this might be the case?
At certain point, I would say honestly I do, but on the other side of the coin, I would say that it opens up more understanding into an encounter that one feels, and not just and I think primarily if you are reading a book, it's the takeaway from the reader from what is being shared, what is being portrayed. So pity porn, yeah, but there could be good takeaways from the sharing of, all of this genuine work. Yeah.
Okay. And I would like to know, how did all of you get started with writing? I think it would be a really good opportunity to hear from Ava about how common people came to be, as well as your novel, and from Liyana and Rolinda on your individual works and your journeys into writing as well. So how did all of you get into writing? What drove you to put pen to paper? Yeah. So Ava?
Well, I've always written my whole life. I've loved words, books, writing. But again, it was that feeling that because I didn't see anybody, in books like me, nobody around me was from a publishing background. I really didn't think that people as ordinary as me could be published writers. And school seemed to say the same sort of thing. It was, I'd had careers advice meetings and they'd say, oh, you like words, be a typist. And it was never, sort of dangled as any kind of possibility for me. And I just, I listened, and their limitations became my limitations. And I just, I worked, so I've done every job. I've cleaned, typed, I've worked in shops, I've everything, but never a proper career. I never thought myself capable. However, years later, I was in my 30s. I had my daughters. I had 3 girls within 18 months, and a real baby bubble. But when they went to school, I felt quite lost, and I didn't quite know what to do with myself. Either return to sort of a job where I'd always felt quite unfulfilled, or go back to school. So I chose adult learning, and I began studying through the Open University. I did a degree through the Open University part-time. It took 6 years alongside family life and everything like that, and helping my husband with his business. And I took a creative writing module as part of that, and the spark it lit within me was just writing all the way up. I had a very good tutor, and she was very encouraging, and I just began to see perhaps this was a possibility for me too. And I began applying for writing opportunities, and I saw the call out for common people as part of the National Centre for Writing, and applied, and my piece was selected. And from there it was like a sort of a door opening on the publishing world. Got a real insight into how it worked, and and I did realize that it is so much based on who you know and your connections, and it would have made so much difference to have been armed with that knowledge before I'd started my writing journey. But the privilege of being not only being published, but there was mentoring and workshops and so much support. And off the back of it, I found an great agent, and we began working on my novel Lives Like Mine, which I started writing, which started as a module, like a creative writing story, as part of my university course, and it just grew from there, really. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. And for Rolinda, let's maybe go on to Rolinda, then we will get to you, Liyana. So Rolinda, how did you get started in writing and putting pen to paper?
I discovered that it started, I think, 2015, when I submitted my piece in the competition, migrant workers poetry competition, and my piece was shortlisted. And then it was the urge started in there, and because to be able to read my piece in the public, it's my first time, and so it was really an extraordinary experience. And that is all started, and then I was eager to know all the because my background really, I don't know how to I don't know that I can write. It's really a self a self discovery talent that I have. So I started to look for workshops that luckily the Singapore literary scene is really rich and so generous that for us migrants that they give workshops. It's a free workshops, especially in the Singlet station that Sir Joshua is so very kind to have it. And my first workshop was with him and with Miss Amanda. And then after winning the competition, it goes on and on. I attended the workshop also by Haugam, and it's all from the Singlet station provided the workshop. And also there is this I joined the Singapore every April. It's a 1 month occasion that all the entire month of April they have this. Singapore is a Singapore Poetry Writing Month. So every day there is this topic and you have to write a poem on that topic. And I think it's really helped me a lot. All of this helped me a lot to gain more courage and to gain more knowledge on writing. And basically I don't really wish that I have this published book, but it's Dr. Richard Angus Whitehead who pushed hard and who encouraged me that you should publish all your work, because he told me that the people would have to hear your voice. And I said, and I told him, I told him that, do you think really I am capable of doing this? So I just give him, the background of this No Cinderella is that I just give him my book. It's all handwritten, and he's the one who did the manuscript and submitted to the publisher. But the Singaporean publisher I was rejected. It was rejected, and I feel so like unhappy, or I feel sad that and I doubted myself that maybe I'm not a writer. I'm not a poet. But when they work together, Dr. Angus and Brosacker, they work together and make this impossible to be possible. So they helped me to publish, and I think it's a very dream come true to have this published book and to be able to be called as a published poet. And with all the help that I received from the Singaporean, I be able also to be a part of one of the editors of Call and Response. And that is a great opportunity. And I was so lucky. I think that my journey of writing started in Singapore, because Singapore is really generous for us and helping us to develop our talents. I think that is my journey.
Yeah, that's wonderful to hear, and that both you, yourself and Ava, that you have this support system to make, the, like Rolinda said, the impossible possible, to put these voices out there. And how about you, Liyana? So how did you end up putting pen to paper?
I think I can.
Why?
I think I can relate to what Rolinda mentioned just now, with regards to, doubting yourself, and then having the push from others to get your manuscript out and then get it published, right? So when I initially, and I didn't have the dream of becoming a writer or even being an author, because my background has always been about in the sales line and doing business, and selling things, not selling story. So I have no intention or thought of being a writer. Um, but what I did was, when I was homeless back then, there's no entertainment that there are by the beach, right? And the only form of entertainment that I had back then was to go to the public library and borrow books. So books became like my escape to, to a different world, to get me away from my harsh reality at that point of time. So subsequently after that, I fell in love with one of these Hunger Games book by this author, Susan Collins, which turns out to be a movie way after years after I read it, right? And at that point, I was like looking at the library sections in Singapore, and I couldn't find any literary works that addresses the issues that is happening here in Singapore. So, for example, homelessness in Singapore, there's nothing that has been written about it. Predated back in 2010, 2011, when I was searching around looking for such works. So, which then makes me feel it kind of developed some feelings in me, and I think based on my emotions, I kind of like, hey, there's nothing that talks about or was written about the state of poverty or homelessness, or whatever issues that Singapore is facing, and it kind of felt that every of this matter is swept under the rug. And so what I did was, as I was going through my own healing journey, I write to heal. So I journal just to heal myself from whatever pain or brokenness that I feel, right? But subsequently, one of my friend, who is a writer herself, was asking me if I have any ideas to share with her so that she can, write. And I play around, getting her to write about, what is happening that has not been written yet, and it's not in the scene yet. And that was when it escalated to her asking me, then why don't you write your story? What happened to, you journaling, and don't you wish to see it in the form of book, which doesn't come across to me before, right? So being in a journey where I am healing, being in a journey where I'm journaling, and also adventuring and discovering other people's work, right? It dawns upon me, um, and it kind of like sparked with that question that my friend posed to me, kind of sparked the interest of, hey, so why not? Why not just give this a chance? So I start writing the book, the raw manuscript back in 2013, but shelve it in on the shelves, and not having the courage to even get it published out or even share it with anyone, right? So in 2018, 5 years later, that was when um my friend pushes me again, that same writer friend pushes me again and say, Liyana, I've read some of your works. Please, please, please try to get it out there. And that was when I kind of like go and said that if you help me with gathering it all up, and give me the motivation to share this with other publishers, that I may try, maybe. And given the entrepreneurial spirit in me, an entrepreneur is kind of like a hustler in a way, right? Where we try to get the impossible possible, like Rolinda. So I knock on many publishers' door. Of course, I do not have connections to any publishers at all. I just, just bang. I just share with them whatever I have at a point, and I was surprised to have one publisher that said yes. Just you just take one, right, to just say yes, and the dream just become. So that was how I think the journey began for me.
Okay. I seem to hear a lot of like writing to heal, journaling, and writing for a very long time. I'm thinking, Ava, that you would have written when you were young as well,
Yes. Oh,
pen things
yes.
down. Yeah.
And that really chimes well with all my thoughts. I've written to make sense of my feelings and to all the time, lots of journaling. And it's amazing how, even though lives like mine is entirely fiction, there are some sentences that absolutely were from that journal and really are from a heartfelt and truthful place, particularly when I talk about, feeling othered and the racism aspects that I talk about. They're all from sort of, from a very real place. And yeah, and I do say in Common People, I don't think there's any finer therapy than that of your own pen. I think it's such a useful tool to have, to be a writer. It does help make sense of life and the world you're in, and your sense of self too. Yeah.
So were you journaling a lot as well? In your
Always.
early. I
Yes,
see. Yeah.
always. Yeah. And I've in my loft space upstairs, I have diaries from about the age of about 8 through to sort of in my 20s. And they got, life gets in the way, but I was really dedicated to documenting everything that happened to me growing up. And yes.
Yeah. And I think all of your works actually have that quality of authenticity, of just chronicling everything that happens. I like all of the language that you use, the images and the descriptions. All of you do not shy away from just like putting it down as it is, breaking sentences. And so there's a special rhythm to your work. And now to go on to going back to the issue, the state of being an outsider writer. Do you feel like you're writing from the outside though? Do you feel differently as a writer? So yeah, maybe you can start with Liyana.
That's a very good question because it makes me think,
Because
how
someone can
different can it
throw,
be?
yeah, someone can throw that label on you, but you don't have to be comfortable with it, you don't have to
Yeah.
see yourself in that way. So yeah, do you feel, yeah,
I think for me, I don't feel different
mm,
because for me, though I didn't go to writing school, or I didn't learn the concept of writing, or the framework, how it is to be a writer, or how to write a particular novel or book or anything at all, right?
mm,
Um, I think the intention for me is what that counts, because at the end of the day, it's the story that you wish to get out there, right?
mm,
And that pose for me, what's better than a storyteller when someone can really write that and put it in a book, and it becomes something that it can be shared across media. So if you were to ask me, outsider writer, no, I don't feel that way. It could be that people will,
mm,
it's just right that society will just criticizes your work, criticize whatever, whatever your writings are. But if you apply that medium of criticism to any platforms, it will still be the same. There will always be criticizers of your work. And there are things that goes that we are our best criticizers as well, right? We doubt our own work too. So yeah, outsider, nah, I don't feel that way.
and how about you, Rolinda?
Yes, basically, my writing is an outsider because it's but I think I take it as an outsider. To be labeled as an outsider, I take it as a positive response, because I have the freedom to write in a very my writing is a very raw, and I don't follow rules in writing, and I don't really like those extravagant words. I don't use that on my poems, and I like to I choose simple words that can connect to my readers. And as my writing is a self-discovery talent, so I think in my early writings, I have all this freedom to express genuinely my emotions, and I'm not being aware of all the rules that has writing done. So I think I'm an innocent writer. So I think, yeah, I think it is. I'm an outsider, but I take it. I don't take it as a negative side. I take it as a positive. That yes, I am proud to be an outsider writer. That's it.
Thank you. Now, how about you, Ava?
Yeah, it comes with its own benefits, doesn't it, being on the outside, because and away from sort of the, I didn't go to university until I was in my 30s, so my writing didn't follow any kind of rules. That freedom you talk about is, it's precious, and perhaps that does explain the, our sort of our outside perspectives. Yeah, I think it doesn't have to be the negative that sometimes it can be portrayed as, definitely.
Yeah. Personally, I hope that, that that label can just be done away with, and that
Yes.
all of your writings can actually be, part of the literary fabric in our worlds and our communities and societies. So yeah, and I have to say that your stories all come with a certain rawness to it. There's a certain authenticity, there's a certain rule breaking to it. And I think with Ava, the way you play around with language, and Rolinda, the way you play around with the rhythm and the music, and also with Liyana, just bearing it out there and just telling the truth as it is. I think that there is that all of your works have that really wonderful quality, which I really hope we see more of from all of you. Um, like all of you mentioned like various points when there was something that kind of like drives you to put pen to paper and to put your work out there, and so on. That there is always that or that trigger point that causes you to write the particular stories that you that we are so privileged to be able to read. I would like to know, what are some stories that you feel our society needs to hear more of? You know? Yeah, Ava, maybe we can start with you.
I think just anybody's story that isn't in the mainstream, really. I think that stories are such a great way of understanding other people, and just building empathy really for each other. And you put your feet in somebody else's shoes while you read this book, and you'll become more compassionate soul at the end of it, I'm certain. I think that reading is such a great base for just general kindness in life, and I just think the more stories and the more variety, the more sort of rich life will be for everybody.
And thank you. And then how about you, Liyana?
I think I would love to hear more like what Eva said, the stories that is not mainstream, the stories that in a community or a culture tend to shy away from even discussing about it openly. So these are the kind of stories that is to be told, but have been curbed for so many years. So yeah, definitely I would love to see more of the people, or as what is mentioned as outsiders, right? Stepping up and coming up with their own work. That to me is authentic writing in itself.
How about you, Rolinda?
I think the stories of domestic workers, their journey of how they survive, especially this pandemic, because being lucky in the employer's house, that also the employer is working in the home, and how they survive that one, and how they discover the writings, and how as a writing as a sort of their strength, and therapy, especially on mental health issues.
Mm.
I think I think that will be great if a more of a woman, especially domestic worker, that they look at it as a low wage worker, have the capability and capacity to write and to voice out in public and in society as a whole their voices, how they feel, what they feel, especially also how they feel, their feelings, their true feelings, that how they survive being away from home. And for me personally, I would like I would like to see more of how they live their life away from their loved ones, and taking care of other people's children. So I think that that will be great. That will be great if a lot more have the courage to do.
Yeah, I think, and that also brings to mind, the current state of pandemic, the current state of the pandemic that we're in right now, and so on. That for Ava, I'm actually curious to know if the pandemic has affected any particular communities in the UK specifically, particularly hard. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. It really, really has. It's really had a knock-on effect. We look at the young and children of school age, where you have the safety net while you're in education that you will have a free school lunch. That was a big problem during the pandemic because
Okay.
it was unavailable. You weren't at school, you didn't have your lunch. So because school acts as sort of the social safety net of for a lot of people, without it, children were going hungry. It took sort of footballers in the Premier League to sort of crowdfund and shine a light on the areas that the government was missing out on, because it was to not have the safety net at school, and that to make sure everyone was all right and things. It was sort of left open. It really was society's job to sort of fill the gaps because the government was so lacking.
You made a very good point, because when for school children who may have like violent households, who come from violent households and stuff, when school is a safety net for them, when that's taken away, what happens? Yeah. And how about you, Liyana? Like, do you think with the pandemic, I'm just thinking of people who are currently homeless, for example, without shelter, basic needs, how do you think they are actually affected in Singapore?
Well, one thing that I'm heartened to see is that the community during the pandemic come together and extend out the helping hand. So that is like a win in there's still humanity in this awful dreadful situation right now. That is heartening to see. But I think what the pandemic has also shown to us is that the stark differences between our perception and the reality of a country. So for example, in Singapore, I think it's nearly similar to what the UK is experiencing, is that children in the lower income household will need to stay home and get do home-based learning. And home-based learning requires them to have access to like a computer, a laptop, or internet, which when they are at home and living in such a poverty or lower income household situation, they do not have that privilege have. And it is nice to see the society step up and donate like laptops and all that to help. For the homeless, it's nice and heartening to see the community and the society coming together to extend living spaces and even create like abandoned buildings into a temporary shelter for those who need. So I think the pandemic has somehow became a blessing in disguise in a way, to address the current root issues that we have, and we have for so long deny or for so long swept under the rugs and try to turn a blind eye on and address it at face level.
Wonderful. It's wonderful hearing all of that. And now I would like to actually hear from all of you, like, what do you think? And it's wonderful that we are now able to enjoy all of your stories, all of your like beautifully authentic and really heart wrenching. And at the same time, it hits a particular heartstring. All of these stories. So, what are resources that you think? What resources do you think writers, especially those from more underserved segments of society, what are the resources that you think they need so that we can hear more of these stories, that they can put more of their stories out? So maybe we can start this time with Rolinda.
Okay, I think giving more platforms and live stream media, because in SG male, I noticed male migrant workers have support from the local writers. Like I have to name like Sharif and Mukul. They are well known in Singapore. And I really admire how the local writers really support them. But honestly, for me, I don't have, on my writing journey, I don't have no one to support with me. Only that I got back up from Dr. Angus and Brother Sakir that made that happen through the help of migrant writers of Singapore that I have published my book. But I would like to see more of the women stepping out with the support of the locals. I think more on the workshop, the free workshop that they have it all. They have it, I think, but not most of the domestic workers, like not most of the migrants know that there are more access and there are more workshop that is free to access, and that can enhance all our knowledge to be a better writer. I think more of it.
More workshops and platforms where they can learn
Yeah.
learn from. And I think with the domestic workers in Singapore,
Yeah.
I think some changes need to be made, I think,
I think like
the access also comes with having some time, I think.
Yeah,
right?
I think
Yeah.
because like in my days
Like
in
of
Singapore,
things,
in my days in Singapore, we have this chances to guest on Singapore Poetry Festival and Singapore Writers Festival, but I notice also that it's all the same faces year after year that they are inviting. I wanted that. Why not give chances to others? There are more others that are capable of doing so. That you can highlight them also, to give more encouraging, or to give more inspiration that others will follow also, not just like those names that are now in the live stream. We have a lot more. I know it because in Singapore writers in Singapore, we have now all these we have new ones that I think they are also talented, not like us before that we are so shy to showcase our talent. But now the new ones, they are so eager, and they are so like the boiling desire that they have to be in the media or in the spotlight. There is, and I think they have to give them a chance also to have, how you see that one, the new faces, the new chances for the talents.
Yeah,
I think like
okay, definitely. Yeah, and Ava, and how about you? Like, what do you think are some resources that writers need, especially if they are from a particular segment of society that we don't normally hear from.
Yeah, I think Rolinda makes a really good point with the platforms, and I think that during the pandemic, one thing that became quite apparent very quickly was the use of Zooms and the use of, all this online streaming and communications, and so many things like literary festivals and events and workshops that you'd pay and have to, travel and attend. You could do it from your home, and it cuts out so many more costs and makes it accessible to across, to so many more people and from different backgrounds. And I think just things like that, to be able to open things up so that more people can benefit, has been a real marvel. And I really hope that continues, definitely.
The use of technology to kind of
Yes.
like level and allow people from different spaces and places who may not be able to, access certain resources.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Yeah. Okay. And how about you, Liyana?
I think both writers has brought up very good point: platform, opportunity, and leveraging on the tech, the Internet of Things to bring across the opportunities that wasn't given, or the access that wasn't even made available to certain groups before. And on top of that, I think also that recently we are seeing a lot more people getting back on social medias, and that in itself is powerful in stepping out and sharing your story. I've seen a lot of social media accounts coming together, collecting stories from other individuals, and that became like a springboard for some to leverage on and put their own stories out there. So in introspect, I would say that I think for my book, I leverage on one of the summary that I've shared, a summarized writing of my story, to one of these non-profit organization, which shared it on Facebook, and that it went viral. And because of that virality, it helped me to push for my manuscript to be published in a certain way. So I think leveraging on certain platforms, apart from going for the workshops and trying to assess different things, there could also be opportunity for an individual to try to put themselves up there and just create and share their creations.
So I have just been alerted that we have to come to a close soon. So thank you so much. These are really, really wonderful. And one final question before we close. What are the new works and projects? What new works and projects are you working on? Are you currently working on right now? So Ava?
Right. Well, in September, I begin my master's degree. So I really am learning late and doing everything backwards. But yes, I begin my master's in September. So that will be a year of real, quite intense study. However, I've also got my second book to write, because my Lives Like Mine was part of a 2-book deal. So I'm about 50% into my next book. But if I began to tell you what it was about, it would be so confusing. It makes sense in my head, but it wouldn't make sense out loud just yet. So book 2 and my master's. Yeah, so busy year ahead for me.
Yeah, it does sound like a busy year ahead, and so exciting too, and so true about books and stories making sense here.
Yes.
But then when you begin to explain it, then you realize that doesn't make much sense, right? Okay, and Liyana, how about you?
For starters, I'm sitting for my LNET tomorrow. So that's a national aptitude test for law school. And that is something which I indicated in my book that I would like to pursue my dreams. So that is for starters. I think I'm going to be down for like a 5-year study, and I don't know what will happen next then. And definitely I'm starting on a second book, still a nonfiction, and addressing patriarchy. So that's just the hint that I'm going to give.
Yeah.
Go woman.
Yeah. And how about you, Rolinda?
For me now, there's nothing much I'm doing because of my work schedule, and as you know, I'm still dialing every day on UK. I'm still dialing in UK, and we'll be asking all about your love insulation because that's my work now, and it's based on UK. And but still, I'm still an active in social media. I still guide the Cinderella's Angel. This is all the ladies, all the domestic workers that what we do is we have this weekly topic, and you have to write all the poetry devices. It's a kind of learning process that we are doing. So we have this different topics every week, and they have to write it. And I'm still guiding also the migrant writers of Singapore, and you can visit the page, and there's a lot of things that they are doing now to uplift the migrant brothers and sisters, especially in this pandemic. They are going to have their slam poetry festival on August 1, I think. You can just visit. And I have this, I am one of the contributor in the new book of Singapore Home. And I'm also on migrant writers of Hong Kong also. I'm one of the advisors. So I think it's kind of making me busy, all those online life. But as for me personally, all my writings is just it's just there. I don't have a time to compile it now.
Yeah.
But it's still a good thing though.
It's wonderful. I'm so happy that all of you are writing and continuing to write. And it sounds like it's going to be a busy time ahead for all of you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Now we have come to the end of our session today. So thank you all three writers for their time and conversation and all their insights, and of course your beautiful readings earlier. So for more Meet the World events, so be sure to check out the National Center for Writing website. And thank you all for tuning in today. Yay. Okay.
Thank you so much for having me. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.